and welcome. I am Piers Ridyard, CEO of the decentralized finance protocol Radix, a public ledger entirely focused on bringing DeFi into the mainstream. This is our podcast, the DeFi Download, a show about decentralized finance and all things crypto, where we dive into the details of the projects, assets, and services that are powering the DeFi revolution. Today, I'm joined by Jeremy Epstein, founder of Never Stop Marketing, co-chief investment officer of Crypto Futura Fund, author of 3 books on the intersection between blockchain and marketing, has written nearly 1,000 blog posts on blockchain and the impact of crypto economics, and has been advisor to OpenBazaar, Dapper Labs of cryptocurrency fame, DAOstack, Storj, Arweave, Formatic, now Magic, SingularityNET, Zcash, and is a mentor on the Outliers Venture program Basecamp. He has also briefed 3-star generals on the impact of cryptocurrencies twice at the Pentagon. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Piers, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
So I think that, given that rather incredible introduction, it would be great just for you to give us a
Who's
little
the marketer on this call, Piers? You're really good at this, man. Thank you.
I would love to just get your view on what is marketing in the cryptocurrency space and how does that differ from traditional marketing?
Yeah. So, as you well know, marketing in the crypto space basically comes down to community with the quality of the protocol on top of it. And really, I see it as a hyperspace fast forward endpoint to where all of marketing is headed. With the arrival of social media, en masse back in the aughts, as it were, that the rise of the empowered customer and giving voice to people on Twitter, which is now commonplace, but at the time was like a big novelty, started this transition from brand, all-knowing, all-powerful, just forcing information in a one-way highway at the customer, to really becoming a dialogue, and then the power shifting over to these community and word of mouth, because that's who people trust. So that transition has been going on in sort of the Web 2.0 and offline world now for over a decade. What crypto's done, because of its power and really the value, as you know, the strength of the network can only come from the greater number of nodes, whether it's people or technology in the network. It's basically shown us what the hyper community driven marketing future looks like. So it's really been interesting to see over my career the evolution from community marketing not even important to basically the single most important part of marketing in a decentralized world.
And how, over the course of the, you can say that Bitcoin was sort of a community project, right?
Totally.
It was the only reason that it became valuable was because people wanted it to be so. And they like the idea of Bitcoin being something that could fundamentally come about. And it's only through that collective belief that it did once the technology was in place. How are you seeing the sophistication of how to think about building communities changing over the years since sort of the early days of Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, I think there's one thing we have to point out from the early days of Bitcoin that Satoshi absolutely nailed, which is he wrote a manifesto.
Right.
That's what the Bitcoin white paper is. Like a community, in order for a community to be effective, in order to, what I like to say is pour gasoline on the fire of interest, of the fire of passion, and get it done, is they need something to believe in. They need a cause to rally around. So obviously Satoshi nailed that, and with the Genesis block and front page of the Financial Times and all that kind of stuff, and everything that went from there. And so I think having a community is only part of it, but giving that community something to believe in the sense of purpose, in a sense of mission, and an identity, that really becomes part of who they are. I think those are the key parts. So yes, you need great technology, and yes, you need phenomenal governance, and that's going to be a key differentiator. But I think that idea that you belong to a tribe. Look around sort of the decentralized space now. You have the synthetic Spartans and the Ocean Navy and the Radix Radvocates, and you have people like that who are really starting to internalize this. I always like to say that a brand or a decentralized protocol is successful when people willingly tattoo the logo on their bodies. Right. That's a good indication of that level of passion. So I think what we're seeing, or what has happened in the last, I bought my first Bitcoin in 2013, but didn't really get deep into the space until about late 2015, early 2016. But I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is this tremendous growing awareness of the importance of genuine community, passionate evangelical people who will go out and explain the value proposition, because it's decentralized by nature. Sure, there's a core team that can obviously influence the narrative, but the idea of brand has been decentralized. And what we need to do as sort of navigators or captains of the ship, if you will, not in a hierarchical sense, but in a driving it sense,
Right.
is empower these members of the community with sort of the right type of narrative and the right type of words to help them explain the value proposition. Satoshi did that very early on. Vitalik's, a Jedi master at that. And I think we've seen increasing sophistication at storytelling to help this community go out and, explain why they are unique, different, better, which is really the essence of marketing after all.
And what do you see that's sort of coming over from the crypto world back to the traditional world? Do you see that the traditional world is being inspired by what's happening in crypto, or it's sort of being forced to do it just because people are expecting that kind of interactivity?
Yeah, I don't know how much crossover there is yet, with the possible exception of people trying to figure out how to use NFTs, to really, it's like, I think community's been a big deal. I think what is happening is it's almost like this, they're converging on, or sort of the traditional world is being dragged towards where the decentralized world is. And that's kind of creating a magnetism for what the traditional world needs to do to evolve. So I don't know for a fact, but I suspect that the growth of crypto and the growth of these really hardcore tribes that don't have sort of a centralized power, chief marketing officer, brand, what have you, but yet a strong identity and an incredible passion and a sense of purpose, does provide inspiration for what real brands, that sort of offline or whatever traditional brands, what they are aspiring to. So I think we're starting to see that, but I think more and more it's like, hey, how do we use this stuff to kind of ram down sort of the traditional marketing? So there's some, but I think it's, the traditional world is a lot slower to adapt and realize that at the end of the day, you don't control your brand, your network does 100%. And that's what we see in crypto. The Web 2.0 world is somewhere along that spectrum, depending on the company, of course.
So you talk about like the emergence of tribes, and I think that people talk about tribalism a lot in the crypto space.
Sure.
Do you see tribalism as a good thing?
Well, look, it's yes and yes, yes and no, I guess, because obviously it can go too far and it could become a source of, and we see this with, the vitriol that all you need to do is look on crypto Twitter to discover, in terms of the intensity of tribalism, like my tribe, right or wrong, your tribe is evil.
Right.
That's, extreme tribalism. Seth Godin is the one who wrote the book, I think like back in 2005, 2006, called Tribes, where he basically identified how critical this concept was. So I can't really take credit. I just sort of, his idea was open source. So I just did a pull request on it in GitHub and I'm off and running. Right. But basically, I think you're not going to be successful building a decentralized entity of any kind if you don't create some sort of tribal identity, because you need something more than pure crypto economics to keep people together. Like yes, that creates a large portion of it, but I belong to this group and I have a vested interest emotionally, because there's a saying in marketing, people buy emotionally and they justify logically. So you'll buy into the idea that you're a member of Uniswap or you're a member of SushiSwap or Compound or whatever. And then you'll justify like, oh, well, the token economics better. Oh, there's more volume, or, oh, whatever it is. So I think the tribalism is critical, but going too far can obviously be dangerous. So it's like moderation on most things, I suppose.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've sort of like, I've watched with interest, and my opinions changed over time. Like the Bitcoin maximalists were like used to annoy me. as a thing where they would talk about Bitcoin being the answer to to hard money, the answer to gold, and that belief was what meant that they would argue with everyone. They'd be like, Ethereum's a shit coin, right? Like Ethereum's nothing. It's just like it's a fugazi. But over time, I feel like that belief, that collective belief, is what actually gives it long-term value, is what gives it staying at power, what gives it Lindy effects. This idea that the longer something exists, the longer it's going to continue to exist, and that only with that kind of belief, a true center of belief, like when people talk about, personality, and you have a center of identity, and whether or not that moves based on the interactions you have with others, or you have a true sense of self. I think that there's the same idea in this true belief in something as an absolute truth, not a wavering one, that when you get these massive bull and bear cycles, that is actually what keeps people going. Like people are like,
100%.
Yeah, Bitcoin's at $5,000. Doesn't matter. It's going to be $1 million. So I don't care.
Right.
I'm happy with my Bitcoin. I'm acquiring more. Like
think about this. I mean, I think you nailed it. But think about like the neuro-linguistic programming that the tribe of Bitcoin has. HODL, BTFD, right? Bitcoin fixes this. Like everything is designed to not only inspire but to retain hardcore believers. Like what is it like? Those graphs that'll come out about the HODL waves. Like I saw something like 46% of Bitcoin hasn't moved in the last 2 years, and that's a cause for celebration, right? It's like fantastic, and there's an answer for. There's an answer. It's like, well, of course it hasn't moved because there are too many non-believers. We have to hold out until everybody realizes that this is the second coming of like hard money, and then we can start selling because by then everybody realizes. Or like my favorite one is like by the time you have to, by the time you have to worry about paying taxes on your crypto, on your Bitcoin, you're really not going to have to, or something like that. I don't remember the exact thing, but it was so elegantly said. I just butchered it. But like these concepts of like, we have these core beliefs, and now actually, if you look at what's happening in Ethereum, they're doing the same thing. Like it's ultrasound money. They're sound money, we're ultrasound money, and because of EIP 1559, it's just like genius approach.
It's interesting you think that's genius. Okay, because like I'm on the I think it's derivative. It's like, why are you trying to be like why are you trying to be like Bitcoin? You're just going to constantly be backing against the tribe of Bitcoin.
It's same but different. That's the essence of marketing. Like they're sound money, we're ultrasound money. It's like, okay, well, which one do you want, Piers? Sound money or ultrasound money? Call me when you're done.
Ultrasound money sounds like the kind of thing that when you're having a baby, you come
exactly. Hey, wait, I'm having a baby. No, you're having ultrasound money. You're fine. It's a girl.
Ultrasound deficit, I think is what it's called.
Ultrasound, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know, but the effort, whether it's genius or not, isn't up to me. It's up to the market to decide. But the point is, it's an effort to create like these core, almost meme, concepts that then become repeatable, viral in a sense, that people start believing it. Because as one thing we all know, all this stuff is belief. That's what Bitcoin's exposed, that money and value, what has value is a belief system. A $69 million NFT is about belief. It's not about inherent intrinsic value.
Sure. I mean, that I think that is the truth of almost everything, right? Like, there's very few things that are priced on just utility. Everything else is store of value plus utility. We make store of value of everything. Houses are stores of value.
Right.
So I think this tribalism is essential. The thing I'm trying to work out is like, is it always essential, or is it essential until it's reached mainstream, and then post mainstream, like what happens then? Like, does it then become boring? Is it the internet? Like, is it the early days of the internet versus the internet now, where people are like, oh yeah, I have an internet connection, I don't really know who supplies it. Whereas in the early days, you'd be like, I am a, plus net user. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more critical in the early stages of like the Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm
Mm.
mentality. Like, you're not going to be able to like get to that point where you get to the edge of the chasm without your tribe. And I think the tribe is critical to getting over the chasm. But once you're over it, I think because the numbers get smaller, you're only going to have, it's like I think both Godin and Clay Shirky was talking about, like there's like a very small percentage, 1% of the people are sort of the core deliverers, 10% is sort of the more active community, and then 90 people, like the 110 now, or 1990, sorry, it was the 101 there, whoops. And the other 90 are sort of passive. So that number is going to get smaller. But I think any product or any team is going to have a core group of passionate people. It'll just get proportionally smaller. And the danger, of course, is as the market gets bigger and those are proportionally smaller, if you seek to maintain a focus on that tribe, you'll start developing and building for them, and then you'll be ignoring the larger part of the market. So I
Right.
think you need them because they will continue to be a critical part. I mean, even Microsoft has a whole MVP, program. I mean,
Right.
they're Microsoft, for God's sake.
Right.
So, I think it's there. It's just like the relative importance to overall marketing strategy diminishes as you hit mainstream. The good news for everyone in crypto, we don't really have that problem just yet.
Yeah, we don't have that problem. And also, like, fundamentally, it's still, it only comes into being because people believe. Like that is the only way. Crypto is a mass exercise in willing a new system into existence, and the only way that it happens is by people getting over all of the horrible user experiences, the ability to just lose, keys and lose money and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of crazy.
That's the part is, like, for example, the Bitcoin pizza guy, who everybody likes to say, oh, it would have been $45 billion, whatever. I'm like, if that guy hadn't made that purchase,
right,
we wouldn't have started that whole process of Bitcoin has some value. Like, you get 2 pizzas for it, therefore it has value. So he's the guy he was the little piece of snow at the top, but just like, if he hadn't done it, we wouldn't have the snowball. So I'm like, we owe him a debt of gratitude.
Yeah, I mean, the irony is if everyone went back in time with the knowledge they have now, they probably collect loads of Bitcoin and would have.
Of course, exactly. I mean, that's obvious right now. But you only collect it until somebody realizes, like, there is a value, and you have to take that chance. Like, you have to be willing to spend a small portion. Otherwise, you're not really saying there's value.
Here's why it may not ever do the same thing that the mainstream companies do. Okay. Because fundamentally, as you're saying, these are decentralized entities. It is owned by the community. It has essentially, it has governance, and it has this ability for a community to continually churn over time. And the only way that community engages, makes decisions, improves the protocol is by having some core of belief that keeps them doing that, keeps them working towards whatever the mission is of the organization, that really doesn't ever stop until you reach every single person in the world. And you're not really ever going to do that because there's always going to be something that you can do to improve what you've already done. There's a great ripping off Leonardo da Vinci, there's no such thing as finished projects, only abandoned ones.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great point. Like, you do need the community, and the tribe is basically what helps push the network forward. But I suppose, like, as the network grows, you either need more push from the same number of community members, or more community members applying the same level of push to kind of keep that flywheel. I mean, maybe at a certain point it's a flywheel and you don't need to worry about it, and that's a fair point. But, like, you're so far away from that point where everybody's like, oh, we just accept it as a thing, that I think for the large portion of the growth, if we're talking about trillion or multi-trillion dollar protocols, like, we got a long way to go. So I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah. So you completely changing the subject.
Okay.
Tell me about briefing the Pentagon, and why did that come about?
So this is a great story, or it was fun. So I live in the DC area. That's all that I'm going to give. And somebody I know in the government said, there's a lot of questions about this Bitcoin thing. Like, whatever. So he put me in touch with the office of this general, and the general basically through his chief of staff said to me, I have 3 questions. Number 1, what is Bitcoin? Or what is blockchain? Number 2 is, why do I keep hearing the words China and blockchain? And then number 3 is, what do you think are the potential national security implications of the arrival of blockchain? So I was like, those are some good questions. Now I'm like, I'm not a national security expert, but I can think about some. So put together this deck, and I go in and I'm talking to this guy, and I figure, you know what, I got to start at the basics. So I feel like I'm going to explain the Byzantine generals problem. And in like, in like 50 seconds, the guy got it, like totally got it. And I was like, of course, he's a general. And they just had another word like signal intelligent or something, but they're like, this is a problem we have, and it made total sense. Once he got that, we were off and running. It was just like, it was like such an amazing moment where like the guy's like, of course, that's an obvious problem that you have when you're commanding it, when you're trying to organize an army in the field. So that was the first time. It was just a great, healthy. The guy was so the first time was with this guy, and the second time was with a larger group of people. But this guy was just so, just really thoughtful, asked great questions, just really just open-minded, didn't try to shut anything down. So that was great. And then the larger group they had done their homework. They asked a lot of questions just on trying to understand. And obviously, you don't have to be a Jedi master to know how important the US dollar is to American foreign policy. So we talked a fair amount about like, what does that look like, and what are some of the potential issues and what have you. And I remember in that meeting, I was like, we should really start secretly buying Bitcoin. We should just But I was like, I don't control the budget, but it's just a thought, So maybe they're doing it. I don't know. That would be great. But as a hedge against the last year or so. So you never know. It was pretty cool though. I mean, we were right down the hall from the Secretary of Defense on the way out. I walked by the office, and it was just like a little Star Trek. And I've lived in DC area most of my life, but it was.
That's really cool. That's really cool. What was your crypto moment? Like, what made you realize that crypto was something special and wasn't just like this weird technology fad?
So there are 2 moments that I point to. So, like I said, I got my first Bitcoin in 2013 because I read about it on Fred Wilson's blog. And like, if Fred were to tell me to like sell one of my kids, I probably would do it, So I was
for context, who is Fred Wilson?
Fred Wilson is the godfather of all venture capitalists, avc.com. I mean, the guy's like, he's the GOAT. He just invested in everybody who's meaningful and then some. I mean, it's just amazing. So I've known Fred since 1999, and privileged to meet him in person a couple times. But he said like, oh, there's this thing called Bitcoin. You should go buy it or check it out. It's at Coinbase. I was like, whatever. So I go bought some, whatever. But I didn't really think about it because I was working on another project at that point. I was head of marketing at a SaaS company. And about 3 years later, when the mission was over, I sort of was trying to figure out what to do next. And I was like, all right, I have these Bitcoin. What the hell are these things? So then, I proceeded to what we would now call fall down the crypto rabbit hole for like 6 months. I probably read I'm relatively technical. I've got like 4 crypto miners in my house, theoretically, if anyone's actually listening. But Verizon's going to find me. They're like, why is this guy pushing a gig every day? But he's got like all this stuff going on. But anyway, so I probably, I'm relatively technical, so I probably read like 250, 300 or more white papers, and I just devouring like Vitalik stuff, just like doing the best thing. I mean, I'd have to like lock myself in a room for 2 days just to read one of his things, of course.
Oh, Vitalik's blogs are great, man.
Ridiculous. Yeah. So there was a moment where like I remember shooting up on my couch, and I was like, holy shit, this thing is a tsunami of disruption. And basically no one sees it's coming. And that was like the first like aha intellectual moment, but the actual sort of real moment was, I don't know exactly when it happened, but relatively soon thereafter, I had 2 clients who each owed me like $1,000 of T&E reimbursement. One was in Switzerland and one was in the UK. And you probably can relate to this given your background and where you live in theory. And so the Swiss guys were like, we're going to do it by the book. We're going to send you a bank wire and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay. And the guys in London were like, well, we can send you ETH if you want to. That's no problem. So
Yeah.
the Swiss guys, it took 3 weeks. It got rejected twice. And I ended up paying like $82 in fees on the $1,000. The UK guys, 4 seconds, 10 seconds, 4 cents in fees. And I was like, well, literally, I was like, game over. I was like, it is game over. Like, who would ever do this? And so I said to people, like, not only will I take crypto for international clients, I'll only take crypto for international clients. And that's when I was like, the banking system, part of my French there. That was it. So those were my sort of 2 moments that I always point to. And there are obviously a bunch along the way. I'd say the first time I logged into something with MetaMask from a single sign-on perspective, I was like, well, this is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, I think that's that's a paradigm. It's interesting because we've done it with GoodFi. We did a bunch of user research about like the first getting into crypto, and one of the things that users come across that you forget is this idea that once I have crypto and MetaMask, I can just go and use anything. I don't have to give any more details up. I don't have to do any more logins. It's literally those 2 things. And now suddenly an entire universe of financial products and services available to me. It's sort of the internet moment of a browser, but for finance, which is kind of insane.
Yeah, I agree.
When you start working with a project and you start like thinking about how to build the narrative, build the story of a project, what do you go through? Like if someone was listening to this show and they're building a new DApp, what would you advise to them the process of starting to think about this from an external consumer of what they do?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, I like to take people through a process that's called a messaging platform. And basically what we try to do is, I mean, usually the technical founders, like they intrinsically understand what makes their DApp, their protocol, unique, better, different. Where they struggle is communicating that in a way that everybody else understands, right? So what we try to do is basically pull back successive layers of the onion to get to the point is like, why does this matter? As my one of my mentors used to say to me, you should imagine everybody who you meet has on their forehead tattooed the words, why the fuck should I care? And if you can answer that question, so I sort of said, let's put ourselves to that test. Tell me something that I haven't heard from every other DApp, every other protocol. We scale more, we're faster. Okay, great. You know how many people have told me the exact same thing? Like everybody, right? So what is your value proposition? And then I sort of say, look, everything when you communicate comes down to 3 simple components. You just need 3 ideas. So I call these the messaging pillars, right? 3 ideas that you just want to drive home to everybody constantly. And it's like, it all fits into that proverbial elevator pitch, but really weeding it down to like, what are the 3 things that make your offering, your value proposition? How do you support that value proposition that we worked up with 3 differentiators? Because, too many people get on these long podcasts or these webinars or whatever. They go on for like, tell me about your project. And like 8 minutes later, you're sort of finished. Like, no, people don't have that attention span. It's got to be short. What are the 3 things? Now, I probably just failed that because I didn't give you 3 things, but 1, value proposition, 2, messaging platform, and then 3, sort of write down that beginning of the narrative of like, what's the story that you want people to walk away with from their encounter with you. That's kind of what I think is important.
And let's take something like Zcash as an example. What was the process that you went through there to get them from where they were before to what their messaging ended up being?
So Zcash actually was a little bit different, where Zcash, and I give Zuko a ton of credit, it wasn't so much that he engaged with there. He said, I need a chief marketing officer. Mm-hmm. I need someone for Electric Coin Company, not for Zcash, obviously. Yeah. And to his credit, he said, Jeremy, since you've been in the marketing world for 20 some years, you've been the head of marketing, it's more likely, and you understand crypto. clearly not Suzuki's level, respectable level compared to most marketers. Like, let's be clear. I'll tell you, one time I was so lucky. I'll take a small tangent and come back. I was invited to the Zcash team offsite, and I had the privilege of sitting in a room with the guys who invented CK Snarks, Vitalik, Vlad Zamfir for like an entire day. And I promise you, I was doing the best I could to like hang on and follow. I was like, I can do it. But about 11:30 in the morning, I was like, I'm tapping out. I can't do it anymore. But I was proud that I made it for like a good 2 hours, 2.5 hours to check cryptographic gates and all kinds of stuff and whatever. Anyway, so Suzuki basically said, look, I want to find someone who can run the marketing for us. Since you've been doing this for all these years, it's more likely that you'll be able to find someone
right.
than I am. So I basically designed a process, helped him run it. And, the guy who's the CMO today is the guy we picked. So I guess he's doing a good job. So that's what I did for him. I just try to help in any way I can. Because for me, the single most important thing is I have 3 kids and I want them to live in a decentralized future. So I'm doing what I can, however, in my little corner of the world, to bring that decentralized future to the present as quickly and safely as possible.
I think that because we went through this exercise with you as well. You are a Radix advisor, which has been so fantastic working with you. But like as anyone who's seen our updated messaging around, build fast and don't break things, reward everyone who makes it better, and scale without friction. It's amazingly hard to actually condense things down into a very small number of things that are fundamentally correct. Like there's lots of things that you can say that you'd like to do, but then actually making sure that it's directly in line with what your value proposition is, and then making it into a story that makes sense. Yeah. And then for Radix, the thing that I enjoyed the most, I think one of the greatest points with that was starting with what would you say about the future that you're trying to bring about, that the technology platform that does that has to do? So we were saying like, what does the future financial system of the world? What are 3 facts about the future financial system of the world that have to be true for it to come about? Right. And we realized, like, fundamentally, you can't get in the way of innovation. Like if Ethereum developers are spending 90% of their time securing their applications and 10% of it on building functionality, and still there is $285 million of hacks to date.
Ouch. Yeah.
Right? That's hacks. Then we're never going to build the future financial system of the world on that. It's too vulnerable, it's too insecure, it's too difficult. So we fundamentally have to build a system where you can build fast and don't break things. And then the second pillar, like looking at this idea that these systems are systems of incentives, right? Mm-hmm. Like we started with Bitcoin as a programmatic way of getting people to provide computing power to a network. But we haven't stopped at building these systems of incentives. I think this is some of the stuff that you talk about in your book, which is brilliant. Anyone should read it. So I'll never stop marketing. It's blockchain marketing, and it's free. So like, what's not to like?
I don't even ask for your email address. You can just have it. That's right.
But this idea that like, you can create incentive structures, incentive systems around everything that create value that repeats within the system. And we realized that, fundamentally the entire ecosystem of DeFi applications are built on open source code. And without there being a way that you reward those people, create a incentive structure that means that those who create great bits of code, even if they don't create great applications, great bits of code, that they can then be successful on the back of that, of successful applications, because there's royalties that go back to those people. That's a bigger idea than just the technical build code, get paid. It's about building an entire system of incentives to get brain power into a network. Mm-hmm. And then the last one, scale without friction. Like everyone talks about, hey, we can scale to 1 million or 1 billion or whatever. But fundamentally, it's just getting out the way of innovation. It's just, you were talking about Ethereum costing 4 cents to send a transaction from London
the good old day, man. I tried to do a transaction the other day, and it popped up and said the gas fee was $1,600, and I was like, "No, I'm sorry, I just can't do that." That just doesn't. But I will say, look, I mean, thank you for your kind words, and I will say, if there are people who are in a similar position I'd say a lot of credit goes back to you and your team, because I think what you guys realize, and this is true for everybody, and this is true going all the way back to the beginning of technology, is that there's this naive belief oftentimes by technological founders that the best technology always wins. Betamax VHS being the classic example, but there are plenty of them. So I think what you realize is like, it's not just about how great our technology, and sure, Radix is phenomenal technology and all of those good reasons. But if you can't tell the story and explain why in a compelling way that, coming back to getting the community excited, gets the tribe motivated, is what is meme ready or eventually meme ready, it doesn't really matter. And that's where the marketing. So you realize the importance of marketing. And I think, coming back to the classic Peter Drucker, he says there are only two things that create value: innovation and marketing. Everything else is a cost. And that's what he says. But marketing in his world is, he says knowing the customer.
Peter Drucker really said that.
Dude, yeah, Peter Drucker said that. He basically says, look, the objective of marketing is to know the customer, in this case, the developer, right, the end user, well that the product or service sells itself. If you don't understand your community, you can't do that. And that goes into the product. It goes into the protocol. So those are the two things. And if you understand that, you at least have a chance. If you don't understand that, it's going to be tough sledding.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, I get passionate about this topic. What do you want from me? Sorry, man.
So, where do you think this is going? Like, what's the next sort of like innovations that are coming down the road in terms of the nexus of marketing and public ledgers and decentralized applications?
Yeah, I mean, I think you alluded to it before. I think we're going to start seeing. I mean, crypto economics is one of the single greatest things I've ever come across in my entire life. And I think the ability to take crypto economics and apply it to sort of the fundamentals of marketing as we've sort of known it. I mean, you always need to acquire customers. You need to retain customers. You need to have customer loyalty. But now the ability, or first of all, the necessity to do that based solely on the information in a wallet versus all this PII, data that we have about the whole Facebook industry that we've got. Number one, that's going to change the game, but it's the still fundamental thing is how do you reward your best customers? How do you incentivize them to go out and spread the word for them? How do you, drive new customer acquisition? How do you use crypto economics and token incentives and all that to basically motivate people and push them in the right direction and reward them for the types of behaviors that you want, sort of at a protocol level? And we're already seeing the beginnings of that with sort of like staking. And I mean, those are very early sort of things and not really from some marketing, but I think we'll just see more and more experimentation as sort of we move more into this world of like the developer wars, because it's really who has those developers, who's building those dApps. So who can create the experience and the reasons and sort of the overall end to end of, like, I call it time to dApp, like how quickly you can get on and get your first dApp deployed. Like those are going to be metrics that sort of crypto native marketers are going to look at in order to judge the overall health, strength, and efficacy and effectiveness of sort of their offering. It's like if it takes you 4 days to build a dApp or it takes you 4 minutes to build a dApp, where are they going to go? Even if this is a little bit more inferior technology, at a purist level. So I think you'll start looking at some of those things and then bake in the crypto economics into that, to like incentivize the community to create simpler on ramps for developers, for example. All kinds of stuff.
It's interesting. You also talk about wallet relationship management?
Yeah.
Is that right? WRM?
WRM, exactly.
Like what's that about? What does that mean?
So, if anyone from the traditional world is very familiar with customer relationship management, which is basically know everything you can about your customer, which means grab all this data, build data warehouses. Salesforce is sort of the poster child for that. And they basically invented the CRM industry. Right. So basically I said, look, as the only thing we know about, coming back to our MetaMask conversation, the only thing I know about you is your wallet address, what your balance is, what other tokens you have in there, and what your transaction history is. Right. So now the question is, what can I do with that information that doesn't require more privacy invasion, but allows me to tailor messages and relations? If I say, oh, wow, these 6 people all hold, Radix and Ocean and SingularityNet, and these people all hold, Radix and, DAOstack and, Binance. Well, those are 2 different customer segments. right?
Right.
So maybe there's some ways that I have to think about market, because you'll have, or even better one might be, this person has a ton of art NFTs, this person has a ton of gaming NFTs,
Right.
and this person has a bunch of DeFi,
Right.
So those are basically three different customer types within your network. They all might also hold EXRD,
Right.
but these are the art sort of, whatever art people, these are the gamers and these are the DeFi degenerates kind of things. You're going to talk to each one of them differently based on what's being held in their wallets. So that's wallet relationship management.
That's super interesting. That's super interesting.
Yeah.
I like the there's also a possibility, like our head of product design who recently joined us, who's going to be like, no, this is ridiculous, Piers. But like, you could probably also do contextual based interfaces as well, based on the knowledge of what tokens are held in a wallet, change the way that the wallet prioritizes what shows, and then create better context around how to use it.
That's WRM. That's literally what I'm talking about. Exactly.
There's some super,
and he will hate you.
do you think that this is contrary to what the crypto crowd wants now, though? Like this idea of marketing via wallets, is that not something that people are like, well, no, because I don't want to be marketed to, because I got into crypto to be private? Or do you think that good marketing, like there's always this argument, right? Good marketing should just be useful. It shouldn't get in the way.
Right. Well, we're going to have plenty of bad marketing, because the challenge with marketing is that there's no barriers to entry to becoming a marketer. Like, you don't have to go to Harvard Medical School to get a marketing degree. You say, hey, Piers, I'm a marketer. Why? Here, I actually know a few words in marketing, right? And the other challenge with marketing is that there's a huge imbalance between the buyers of marketing and the sellers of marketing. Everybody knows they need marketing, but to the point I had with Zuko before, they don't necessarily know how to, intelligently purchase marketing services, because they're not marketers, right? So you have this, and also because there's no barrier to entry, basically the supply of marketers is ginormous. So you have a hard time separating the wheat from the chaff. You have uneducated buyers, and you have a large number of people who aren't really necessarily good marketers. They just do marketing because you don't need the credentials. Well, that creates a recipe for a lot of dissatisfied and bad marketing, which is what most people will say is, oh, most marketers suck. That's true. Most marketers do suck, right? So you're going to have a lot of bad marketing because everybody knows they need marketing. That being said, to your other point, which I think is totally valid, is like, if you don't notice it, that means it's really good marketing. And everything's marketing. The interface on the wallet is a marketing decision. What you show, and you can do it in a subtle way. Apple's doing marketing all the time, but no one necessarily thinks about it. Apple's a bad example because they're so out there. But I think you'll see that, and yes, you will see it, but that'll come back to haunt people. You'll be able to opt out, number one. Number two is, if there's a bad user experience, they'll just move their stuff to another wallet. So that's like, you have to make your wallet and your interface the single best one. Otherwise, switching costs are basically zero, which will force the marketing quality to go up, because otherwise, you don't have the Citibank versus Bank of America problem where I'm stuck with you.
Right.
If I don't like you, I'm out. And not only am I out of your wallet, I could be out of your protocol.
Right.
Rage quit for basically no cost. Or $1,600, as the case may be.
Yeah. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, Jeremy. As always, if people want to find out more about you, follow you, get in touch, what should they do? Where should they go?
Yeah, my two big ones are JER979 on Twitter. And also I blog 5 days a week at blog.neverstopmarketing.com. So most of the time I'm writing about crypto. Every now and then I'll just riff on something else. But those are basically the two primary areas. And also, I'm happy to talk with anybody. I'm always looking to learn. This space is so out of control now. I used to think I was on top of it, but that was naive. Now I have no idea what's going on. I'm just doing my best to it's like that conversation with Vitalik. I'm just trying to hold on.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you, sir. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.